The bond between siblings is often seen as one of the strongest people can form. After all, who knows you better than the person you grew up with? But as certain cases prove, sometimes the bond can turn into a toxic obsession, resulting in a shared psychosis. One example is the case of the Papin sisters, who in 1933 committed one of the most brutal and infamous double murders in France's history. The Papin sisters were born in Le Mans, France, to Gustave and Clémence Papin. Leah, the youngest, was born in 1911, Christine in 1905, and the oldest, Emilia, in 1901. Their parents were cruel and abusive, and the two youngest girls were given to relatives to raise, as their mother was deemed unsuitable. In 1912, when Emilia was 9 or 10 years old, she confessed to her mother that her father Gustave had raped her. Instead of offering comfort, Clémence blamed the rape on the young girl, claiming that she had seduced her own father and sent her to live in a Catholic orphanage known for its ruthless discipline. Soon after, she was joined by her younger sisters. Emilia eventually entered a convent and lived the rest of her life as a nun. Unfortunately for Leah and Christine, they would not manage to escape their mother's cruelty the way their older sister did. Although they also intended to become nuns, their mother forbade it, instead deciding that the girls would be put to work as maids in the village when Leah was only 15 and Christine 21, in order to give her a source of income. Despite the age difference, the sisters were close. People in the village found them strange, as they communicated with very few words, leading some to believe they had telepathic powers. Although they were seen as eccentric, they managed to work for several households for 7 years before landing a job at the estate of a retired solicitor named René Lancelot, who lived with his wife and their adult daughter Genevieve. The work was grueling. The sisters worked for 14 hours 6 days a week and were allowed a half day off on the 7th day. This wasn't unusual for the time, as working conditions for servants and other workers were often abysmal. After a few years, Madame Lancelot's mental health began to deteriorate, and she would lash out at the girls, often berating and abusing them. She would go as far as to wear white gloves and run her fingers across the furniture to check if everything had been cleaned properly. On February 2nd, 1933, René Lancelot was supposed to meet his wife and daughter for dinner at the home of a friend. When they didn't show up and he couldn't get in contact with them, he became concerned and went back to the house to look for them. When he arrived, he was unable to get inside since all of the doors had been locked. The house appeared completely dark, except for the flickering of candlelight at the window of the maid's room. He went to the police, and the officers managed to get in the house. With only a flashlight to light their path, the men made their way through the house. One of the men pointed the flashlight to the staircase, where they found an eyeball lying on a step. Upstairs, they found the bodies of Madame Lancelot and Genevieve. They had both been beaten to a pulp. Their faces had been mangled so badly that they were unrecognizable. Both women had had their eyes gouged out, and their genitals and thighs had been mutilated with a knife. Fearing that the maids had met the same fate, the officers made their way to their room. There was no answer at the locked door, so a locksmith was brought in to unlock it. Expecting to find the maids dead, the officers instead found the sisters in bed together naked. There was also a bloody hammer with hair still clinging onto it laying on a nearby chair. Upon questioning, the sisters confessed to the murder, saying that they had defended themselves after the madame had become irate over a faulty iron. The sisters were arrested, and after news of the murders came to light, the tabloids went berserk. The sisters became an instant sensation, not only in France but also overseas. Speculation ran rampant that the sisters were also lovers. Interestingly, some people saw the sisters as folk heroes, symbols of the working class who had revolted against the abuses of their employers. The sisters were separated in jail, and because of this, Christine became highly unstable, often lashing out in violent fits. In July of 1933, she even tried to gouge her own eyes out during a fit and had to be restrained in a straitjacket. She tried to take sole responsibility for the crime, but the authorities believed she was only doing this to save her sister. On the rare occasions that the sisters were allowed to see each other, witnesses said that they behaved strangely and exhibited behavior that indicated a sexual relationship. During one meeting, Christine reportedly unbuttoned her blouse and threw herself at her sister. 8 months after the arrest, the sisters were tried for their crimes. Their lawyer pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity and provided testimony that the girls had come from a family with a history of severe mental illness. Their grandfather had a history of violent fits, and they had other relatives that had committed suicide or lived in asylums. The sisters were eventually found guilty. Leah received 10 years of hard labor and Christine received a death sentence, since it was concluded that she was the dominant one of the two and probably initiated the violence. Eventually, the death sentence was commuted to life in prison. Christine's condition while in prison deteriorated rapidly. She refused to eat and became severely depressed. She was eventually moved to an asylum, but died in 1937, only 4 years after the murders. Leah was released in 1941. She went to live with her mother and once again got a job as a maid under a new name. The date of her death is unclear. Many believed for years that she had died in 1982. But in 2001, a documentary filmmaker making a movie about the sisters claimed that he had discovered that Leah was still alive and living in a hospice in the year 2000. She was unable to confirm her identity since she was partially paralyzed and unable to speak. The sisters were eventually buried together in a cemetery in Nantes. If you like this video, please subscribe to Crypticc for more.